All right, it's time to talk with our featured guest, returning guest, Dr. Andrew Vallo. Andrew, how's it going, man?
Hey, Michael, doing well. Excited to be back here. Yeah, this is actually, I think, my third time on your podcast, which is a new record for me. So other than my podcast, this is the one I've been on the most now. So that's kind of a cool honor, and I appreciate you having me back here.
Yeah, man, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. It's because you're doing so many amazing things. One thing I want to dive into, can you kick things off by telling us a bit about your practice? Who are you serving and what are some of the unique things you're doing for your patients?
Yeah. So right now I have four dental practices. Two of them are general based. So, we focus on general and cosmetic dentistry. We do a lot of Invisalign. So we're already Diamond Invisalign providers, but we're about to hit that Diamond Plus, that next tier there. So that's been a big practice builder for us. My other offices are implant focused, and all we do there is implants, and it's mostly full arch cases. We do some singles here and there. But our main focus for our advertising and for our consultations is patients that are interested in having, full arch cases done. We don't do any hygiene. We don't do any restorative. We don't do any endo. So it's a totally different model than my general practices. My first two practices are both on one side of Tampa. They're about 5 miles from each other, one general, one implant. And my newest two practices are actually in the same building. So we combined the two models into one space. We were able to have a shared sterilization area, shared patient lounge area, at the front, shared reception desk, with kind of a seat for each side of the office. So we were able to save some cost on the build out. We're able to save some cost on rent and some other expenses by combining these two offices into one building. So it was an experiment. It's worked out better than I could have hoped. All four of these practices were startup practices. So we started with 0 patients at each location. And we are now targeting to kind of switch gears and start looking at acquisitions. My plan is to acquire 2 more practices for the group by the end of this year. So,
Gotcha. So a lot of questions within that, but why acquisitions right now? Like, why are you deciding to transition?
mostly just the timeline. The timeline on a startup typically is like 18 months on average. Sometimes it can even take longer than that. Sometimes you get lucky. And one of my startups, we just found an old dental space, which I would consider doing that again, as opposed to an acquisition, especially for the implant offices. That works very well. But if you don't have an existing space and you have to do a full build out, and my most recent one was actually a ground up construction, so that took even longer. But even an existing building, by the time you sign the lease, have the floor plan drawn up, approve the floor plan, you go through permitting, you go through construction, you deal with construction delays, you get the equipment in there, you get open. Realistically, you're looking at like 18 months. And that's a long time. I want to speed up our growth a little bit here. So we did 4 startups in about 3 years. But now we're looking to, like I said, try to do about 2 practices each year, moving forward. And the easiest way to do that is to acquire practices, or at least to find existing spaces for practices.
Why are you speeding things up?
If you ask my wife, if you ask my mother, probably my biggest personality flaw, though sometimes it works to my advantage, is just I'm not the most patient person. So, once I have an idea in my head, I want to move on it. And after going through that drawn up startup phase 4 different times now, I guess 3, because the last one we kind of did together. But after going through that process multiple times, I don't have the patience to wait another 18 months to, get another practice open. So I guess that character flaw is maybe working in my favor in the sense of, working us towards some faster growth here. The other reason though is because I've kind of stepped back clinically. So, when I first opened my first startup, I was working 5.5 days as an associate when I first graduated school. And then it was down to 5 and then it was down to 4. And then when I opened my first startup, I started at 3 days a week. And whenever we grew, I just added an associate rather than adding more days. So I stayed at 3 days for a couple of years, and I cut down to 2 days. And then just about 2 months ago, I cut down to 1 day a week. So I'm only in the office seeing patients on Tuesdays. I've really turned my focus to Invisalign and some cosmetic cases. And eventually I may cut that out completely. I don't know. Right now I'm kind of enjoying this, 1 day a week. So I'm still, getting my fingers wet and still doing some dentistry. And now I'm really focusing on the dentistry that really fills me up. But it's created more administrative time for me. And so with, more admin time, I also have an executive assistant. We have a fractional CFO now, who's actually my father. He retired from 40 years in banking. He was a bank executive. So now he's kind of helping us with some of the financials behind the scenes. So now that I've added to the leadership team, I've created more admin time for myself. I have more time to focus on, faster growth for our group.
When was the first time you opened the West Chase, right? I want to say.
Yeah. So the West Chase was the first office. We opened that in April of 2021. So it's been just a little bit over 3 years now since we opened that first office.
Man, I guess it feels like almost everything's kind of falling into place with you. You know what I mean? Although it doesn't look like it. I know there's like there's a post that we're going to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Where, and I love how you kind of like categorized it as grit. But before that, you talked about like you're doing full arches, you're doing Invisalign. Real quick, for Invisalign, how did you scale that fast? And what's your marketing look like behind that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we first opened, we weren't doing that much Invisalign. And honestly, it's been on kind of an exponential growth trend where things just really keep ramping up for us. What I realized very quickly is that Invisalign is viewed as a commodity to patients. So unlike some of the other dental services, it really is price shopped. Patients think Invisalign is Invisalign anywhere, even though it's not the case. There are, unfortunately, you don't really have to have a whole lot of training to offer Invisalign. So there are some docs that just kind of dabble in it. And they kind of let the Invisalign techs plan the case and everything. We are completely hands-on. All of our cases are completely customized by myself or our other doctors. I've trained our other doctors on Invisalign. But I realized, even though I think we provide this great service for it, that patients are shopping around and we are losing a lot of potential Invisalign patients because they're like, oh, I found it cheaper somewhere else. We're in Tampa. It's a very competitive market. There's a lot of offices that are trying to price themselves affordably to get more business. So we started running discounts, lowering our prices, having lower barriers to entry. So, when we first started, our Invisalign deposit was like $1,500 to start. I was worried about losing out patients that were going to commit and then didn't do it. And we lost, that lab bill and all that stuff. But we lowered the deposit down to $395 now. We've lowered it a couple times. And I honestly might even lower it more at some point. But it's difficult when someone's there, especially if they're not even there for an Invisalign consult. They're there for a hygiene check. And you start talking about how they could benefit from, aligning their teeth and straightening their teeth and aligning their bite. And the patient says, this sounds great. I'd love to do it. Like, how much do I have to pay to start the process? And you say, oh, $1,000, $1,500 or whatever it is. They weren't expecting that expense that day. They weren't really ready for it. That's a tough sell on the spot. Like, hey, yes, let's get started. Versus $395 is a little bit easier pill to swallow. So we have a lot of patients who didn't come in that day planning to start Invisalign and they end up starting. That's been a really big change for us. It's just lowering the barrier to entry, running more specials. We do advertise it a good bit. Invisalign is a tough thing to advertise for. And, advertising is kind of my niche when it comes to growing dental practices. I have a much easier time advertising for full mouth implant cases than I do for Invisalign. But I did find if you run really good specials on Invisalign, for a limited time and you create great, attractive looking ads and you spend money on those ads, you can still get a lot of people coming in for Invisalign consults. I've also found that doing some video content for Invisalign ads tends to work very well. Those are some of our best performing Invisalign advertisements are videos that I post and boost on, Facebook or Instagram.
Gotcha. Okay. So then the discounts that you run, besides the lowering the entry barrier, which is $395, but you're thinking to lower it more because people are still skeptical with $395?
The toughest thing when you're trying to get a yes for treatment is just getting some initial skin in the game. Once they make that first decision to put some money towards something, most people are going to follow through with that commitment. But the bigger that initial hurdle is, the tougher it is for them to actually make the commitment. So we do the in-house payment plan. It's $395 down, $400 a month. There's no interest. We don't run credit checks. It's just like, hey, everyone qualifies. You just have to make your deposit and keep up with your monthly payments. And we see them about every 6 weeks. We typically give them 6 trays at a time. So we hold on to the bulk of their treatment to make sure that they are going to stick to the payment plan and keep making their payments and all that stuff. But I do still feel like even that $395 is the initial barrier. It can be a little tough. And so we had Dr. David Galler on our podcast. He's if not the most famous, one of the most famous dentists within the Invisalign community. He's the president of AACA. He's got his Great Reengage course, which I took and really got me started my Invisalign path. But he talked about how his deposit, I think he said it's $200. So the lower you make the deposit, the easier it is to get that initial yes. And I would say we could probably make the deposit $200 and then keep our monthly plan the same at $400 a month or whatever. We probably see an uptick in our Invisalign just because people are making that initial commitment. And once they start the process, then they're more willing to do those monthly payments. So,
have you ever seen someone not stick with their plan Like, you know what I mean? Since it's in-house, you're doing everything yourself.
It's happened a few times. The majority of the time, even when patients fall off the plan, they eventually come back and want to finish their treatment. So it's pretty rare that someone just completely disappears and doesn't want to finish and, doesn't keep making payments. I ran an audit a few months ago of our current Invisalign payment plans. We had $208,000 on payment plan, and of that 208,000, 202,000 was current. So that means there was $6,000 of the 208,000 that wasn't current. That's a little bit under 3%. And even of that $6,000, most likely, I would say at least half of that we were probably going to collect at some point. So, maybe there's $3,000 out there that wasn't going to get collected. To allow us to do so much Invisalign, it's totally worth it. And, the thing with the third-party financing, we do a lot of that too. We just don't do as much for Invisalign because there's a lot of people that don't want to do the third-party financing and they don't want to pay the interest rates and all that other stuff. So the nice thing about doing it in-house is we don't pay any merchant fees. The patient doesn't pay any interest. It is a drawn-out procedure. So it's not like it's one and done and then the patient leaves and it's easy for them to not pay you. They have to keep coming back every 6 weeks. They have attachments on their teeth that have to be removed. So you just got to have that abundance mindset and not be afraid to put yourself in what could feel like a vulnerable situation. If you're willing to do low barriers to entry, you're willing to do in-house payment plans for Invisalign, you're going to do a lot more Invisalign. It's just as simple as that.
So it looks like the low barrier, because Dr. Gallagher and you, right, are like saying, and many, I'm sure more, are making it lower, right? The barrier of entry for Invisalign. Why do you think most dentists are not doing this? Or are they not doing this?
I think it's a couple things. I think, one, a lot of us dentists have this mentality of like, we know our value. We need to get paid based on our value. That's why a lot of dentists won't do free consultations. They won't do free x-rays. All of our consultations are free. We take any necessary x-rays for free at the consultations. Our implant office, we take free CBCTs at all the consultations. And that's been a big part of our growth. So I think part of it is, there's dentists that are like, I could never. So like when we run sales, we're often doing Invisalign for $3,500, $3,700, $4,000. So it's pretty competitively priced, even for our competitive market. There's a lot of dentists that were like, man, I wouldn't do Invisalign for less than, $5,500 or $5,000 or whatever it is. So I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is that if you don't do a lot of a procedure and it's not just supernatural to you, you can't fly through the clin check, you don't have your team well trained on all the efficiencies of it. It could be a lot more work. And maybe at that point, it's not worth your time doing it, for that discounted rate. Whereas when you're doing, hundreds and hundreds of cases every single year, and you've got your team well trained where they're doing everything that they're legally allowed to for the process, and most of your time actually just comes in the initial planning, it makes sense to do it for, that lower price. Not to mention, the more Invisalign you do, the lower your lab bill is. So, if you don't have like any status within the Invisalign, like loyalty program, you don't have a ranking, your lab bill is basically $2,000. But as a diamond provider, our lab bill, and we also get like a small AACA discount, but our lab bill, I think, is around $1,070. It's, a little bit over $1,000. Once we reach this diamond plus, tier, I think it's going to drop to maybe just under $1,000 with the AACA discount. So that makes it easier to offer it, because if I was paying $2,000 for our lab bill versus what I'm paying now, I'd have to charge an extra $1,000 to make the same profit. So it does make it easier. Once you build up your cases, once you build up your reputation and you're doing more Invisalign, it makes it easier to do it for less money because your lab bill and your costs are lower.
Gotcha. Okay. And so you're running these specials, barrier of entry is lower. They're even lower than other practices around you. How are you promoting it specifically when it comes to the videos? Because you mentioned we're making videos and you really like the videos and they're highly converting. What is in the video?
The videos that I typically run, and I do the same video ads for our Invisalign parties whenever we have those, but it's basically me standing in our office doing a selfie video with my cell phone. And we've got like in the background, usually I have like our chandelier, like our little centerpiece there in our operatory hallway. Or we've got like the 3D walls with the gold paneling or whatever, like you see in Breakaway style. So I usually have something like that in the background. And I just take a quick 30-second video myself. I usually say like, hey, Tampa, would you like to save a few $1,000s on Invisalign treatment, blah, blah, blah. And then I introduce myself, hey, I'm Dr. Andrew Vallo. I'm one of Tampa's leading Invisalign doctors. And for a limited time, I'm offering $2,000 off, $3,000 off, whatever it is, Invisalign. For your chance, to get one of the discounted treatments, just send me a message. And I usually do those on Instagram. Like I've realized that different marketing mediums just work better for different procedures. So I don't do any implant advertising on Instagram because most of our implant patients aren't on Instagram. Most of our implant marketing happens on Facebook because a lot of those people are on Facebook. And it's a pretty cheap cost per new patient consult for these full mouth cases. Most of our Invisalign marketing happens on Instagram because most of the patients that want Invisalign are on Instagram. And my cost per Instagram consult is lower than it is with any other mediums. We also do Google ads. Google ads work better for just general new patients, for emergencies, same day emergencies, things like that. We'll advertise a little bit of the dental implants on Google. But again, the cost per implant consult's way higher there. We'll advertise a little bit of Invisalign from time to time on Google, but same thing, you're paying a lot more money for those Invisalign consults than you are through the social media advertising.
Interesting, man. I like that. So do you feel like that's sometimes the reason, and I'm sure you've seen this a lot, right? Like, hey, Andrew, it's not working, right? When I'm pumping this much amount of money on my marketing on Google ads, but literally you're letting us know like, hey, Invisalign works for, right, Instagram.
Yep.
If you're on Instagram, pump it out on there. It's not going to work for implant cases, but then you see some people, I get some ads sometimes on my Instagram where it's like, hey, there goes implant cases, right? That we can do stuff like that for you. Do you feel like that's the misconnect there, the platform?
Yeah, I think my main sentiment here, guys, is that marketing works, but different marketing works better for different services. You've got to find the service or the platform that works best for the service you're trying to advertise. A lot of it's been trial and error for me. Even working with my marketing company, like we'll try things, we'll see how it works, and we'll gauge it. And then if it's working great, we'll put more money into it. And if it's not working great, then we'll switch gears and try something else. But over the last 3 years, I've been able to market for any procedure you want. And we've had success with pretty much some are easier than others, for sure. But we've had success with every different type of service. It's just been doing that trial and error and figuring out what is the best platform for this service, what's the best ad copy for this service, what's the best image for the ad for this service. And you just kind of do that trial and error until you find what works. And the hard part is, guys, these algorithms are constantly changing. So I can have an ad that's working amazingly, and all of a sudden it could stop working. And at that point, you've got to shift gears. So just like anything else in business, you have to constantly have your finger on the pulse with your marketing. So first of all, if you're not using a marketing company, guys, I know a lot about marketing, probably more than most dentists. I still have a full service marketing company I use. You need to do it. This is not the place to cut corners. But if you have a marketing company and you're not meeting with them at least twice a month to go over your ads and talk about things that are working, aren't working, changes that need to be made, you're not doing it right. So I would say if you're not happy with your marketing right now, talk to your marketing company, see if you can meet with them more, have them show you exactly the breakdown of all the different ads that are running, and have these meetings frequently where you can talk about things that you may want to change or try something else, or whatever it is. So
okay. Which ones to you have been the most of a headache when it comes to the procedure to market for?
Probably Invisalign. Invisalign is the service that I want to do the most of in our general practices. And even with all the different tips and tricks I found, it still probably is. So the hardest, the most expensive patients to get in the door are the full mouth implant cases and the Invisalign cases. But I really think it's been even tougher for the Invisalign and the full mouth implants. I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure if the amount of doctors now offering Invisalign compared to the amount of patients looking for Invisalign is just skewed. I'm not sure if it's area dependent, but of all the different things I market for, Invisalign still proves to be the biggest headache, the biggest time suck. That's where I had to get more creative and start doing these video ads, because I was like, man, like nothing's working great. Even our Invisalign parties where I give away a free Invisalign case, I was still struggling to get, great return on some of those ads I was running until I tried a video. And all of a sudden I was getting message leads on Instagram for like $1 and change per lead with this video for the Invisalign party. So you have to think outside the box sometimes, guys. If just because something isn't working doesn't mean that it's not going to work. You may just have to find a different approach for it.
Gotcha. Okay. So then if I could ask, how much of your budget goes toward marketing? How you decided that, and has it changed as your practice has grown?
Yeah, it's fluctuated a little bit. So for instance, I just started, 2 new offices at the end of January of this year. So they've been open February, March, April, May will be their 4th full month open. When they first opened, I was budgeting about $15,000 per month per office. So if you think about it with a new startup, it's a lot of money when you have zero revenue coming in at the beginning. But marketing is an investment. And so fortunately, because I had figured out what marketing works well over the last couple of years, and because I was willing and able to budget that much for the marketing, it's gotten us off to a really hot start. So our new implant practice collected over $200,000 in our first 30 days open. So that was that even blew my expectations out of the water. And they've been keeping that pace up for May. I think today is their last day open. As of yesterday, they had collected $276,000 in May. So they're creeping up closer to the $300,000 mark. That office, it's only been open a few months, is quickly encroaching on the levels of our flagship West Chase office. So that's incredible. The team there is amazing though, and that's a big part of it. Our new general practice, we're spending like the same amount on marketing. It's a little tougher to collect that much money so quickly. You've got insurances that you're waiting to collect on. You're not doing as many big procedures like those full arch implant cases. So, Michael, when you had asked me to come on, you had mentioned what's something that you do that's controversial, as far as advice goes with dentistry or marketing or whatever. And I thought that was a great question, because I think the reason why we've had such fast growth is because I really go against the grain with almost everything. So, conventional advice, conventional wisdom is like, you have to limit your marketing budget to a few percentage points or whatever. And I think that is awful advice. Marketing is the lifeblood of any business, and especially if you're a startup. And a lot of the dentists listening to, our podcast are startup dental practices. They're younger. And if they're listening to traditional wisdom out there, there's a reason why they're growing so slow. There's a reason why, when the bank advisor talked to me when I was doing my first startup, he's telling me that the average dental practice startup only does 274,000 in collections their first year. And, they're telling you've got to be mean and lean. And that was kind of my recommendation, for this episode, was like, why being mean and lean is killing the growth of your startup. If you have a scarcity mindset, you're afraid to spend or invest money into things like marketing that turn ROI. If you're unwilling to invest money into growing your team, it's going to bottleneck you. And so there's a lot of docs that try to do their startups, like I said, mean and lean, maybe have one person running the front and maybe one assistant, and the dentist is doing all the hygiene themselves. Guys, that is not the way to quickly grow a startup practice. If you only have a couple people in there helping you and you're having to do all your own hygiene, at that point in time, maybe you don't need to spend more on marketing because you don't have the capacity to see more patients. It's a snowball effect. So if you get off to this slow start, you're not spending money on marketing, you're doing all your own hygiene, you only have a couple people helping you, at the office. What's going to happen 6 months from now is that you're going to have a small recare program. So it's going to stunt that initial growth, but it's also going to stunt the growth 6 months from now, and then 6 months from then. And it's just going to take you forever to build up your patient base and to build a consistent recall schedule. Whereas if you start, firing out the gates and you're spending a lot of money on marketing, and it's good marketing, and you're working with a good marketing company to do it, and you hire that hygienist and you hire another assistant and you hire somebody else up front, or at least you're outsourcing things like insurance verification and phone calls and things like that. If you're doing all those things, it's going to remove that bottleneck from your startup, and you're going to be able to see way more patients much faster. You're going to start building back that recall schedule right away. So at 6 months from now, like what I'm doing right now for my newest general startup, we are already planning to bring on a second full-time hygienist at our 6 month mark once our first hygienist has a recare schedule. So, but you have to be intentional about these things. Otherwise, it's never just going to happen on its own.
Gotcha. Okay. I noticed you mentioned you have to have an amazing team. Your team is amazing. You said you even mentioned like that team in the implant office, right? They're amazing. And that's a little hard, would you say, like, especially now, trying to find just a team member in general, like, oh my God, now they got to be an amazing team member. So for you, I guess, like, what tricks or tools does your team use to turn calls and queries into like actual appointments? And how do you find these members or team players?
Yeah, no, that's great. So our people, our teams, they're our most valuable resource. So, at this point in time in my career, again, I'm only practicing dentistry 1 day a week. Most of my admin work happens at home. So I'm mostly working from home now. My group would never be doing the things they're doing if I didn't have amazing people around me. If you're a small practice and you're the only dentist there and you're kind of running the show and you're there every day and you're the office manager, you've got a lot more input into everything. And maybe it's not as crucial, but if you have plans to grow, you want to grow into a group practice, you want to grow to multi-locations, whatever it is, you have to have amazing team members. You have to have great systems. You have to train well. You have to onboard well. You have to interview and hire well. To your point, Michael, it is a tough market right now. So, in Tampa, there's a lot of dental offices looking for assistants, looking for hygienists. And I'll tell you what, like our turnover this year has been a little higher than normal. And, at first it kind of bothered me a little bit, but I'm a big believer in, finding the positive in any situation. And I've realized for the most part, the turnover we've had has been for the best. As our organization has grown, as we've created more systems, as, we've become a more polished company, and really trying to focus on our core values and what's important to us. The people who aren't great fits are more likely to find their way out. Whereas if you don't have a lot of organization, it's just kind of a free for all and people are just kind of doing whatever they want. You can have people that maybe aren't A players or maybe aren't the best team members and they're sticking around just because there's no one telling them what to do or, whatever it is. So they can kind of do whatever they want. At this point in time, I've taken this opportunity to really focus on the new people that we're bringing in the door and to try to make sure that their vision and their core values align with the core values of our organization. You need to have all the right people and the right seat on the bus. You've got to have everyone row in the same direction. You've all got to have that same vision. I say all this because I think a lot of dentists are very afraid of losing team members. They're almost being held hostage by their team members because they think, oh my God, if this person left, the whole office would fall apart and I'd never recover. And, they're playing out that worst case scenario in their minds about how they're going to lose their business because this team member left them. And I'm telling you guys that's not what's going to happen. You're going to find somebody else that's an even better fit and your practice is going to be better because of it. Is it stressful? Is it a hassle? Is it, can it be frustrating? Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, like you've got to look at it that way and you can't keep the wrong people around just because you're afraid of losing them. To give you an example, we had a hygienist who left recently and, unfortunately she left with no notice. She just basically walked out the beginning of the day because she was upset about, believe it or not, it's crazy stuff. She was upset about a new PTO policy that, we had come up with. So basically we weren't doing PTO. This was a new benefit that I added because as our organization grows, I try to add more benefits, to even better take care of our team. We added this new benefit and she was mad about the policy. She was upset that we asked for 30 days notice in order to take the PTO because we already have too many people calling out at the last minute for no reason. So we were trying to make sure that problem didn't get worse. So we said, we're going to add this PTO benefit, but in order to get paid for your time off, you've got to give us proper notice so that we can find time to, find a temp or, adjust the schedule as needed or whatever it is. And she was so upset about that she left and quit on the spot, which was crazy to me. She'd been with us for 2 years. Wow. I can't imagine ever doing that, but initial thought was like frustration, anger, all this stuff. How could she do this to me? And then as soon as I kind of like took a step back and took a breath, I was like, you know what? She's been consistently our lowest producing hygienist. We're going to find someone that's a better producer. That's going to help us grow our practice that much faster. And we did. So just keep that in mind, guys. Someone leaving the office is not the end of the world. And honestly, more often than not, it can be a good thing and it can lead to a stronger practice in the future. Don't be afraid to lose employees that are toxic to your practice. Embrace the change and then just really focus on the hiring process. Don't hire too fast just because you feel like you need to get a body in the door. Really try to find someone that's going to be a great fit. Our base pay is competitive for the area. We offer great bonus opportunities. We're now offering more benefits because if you want to attract those A players, you've got to make the job appealing and then have a good onboarding and, training system in place. Have 30-day, 90-day reviews done, things like that so that you can get on top of any issues right away, clear expectations. Because then at the end of the day, if they're not working out, it's kind of on them and it's not on you. But if you don't take the time to properly train them and to set clear expectations and they're not doing what you want them to do, that's more of a you problem than a them problem. So
Gotcha. Did you find another hygienist after that or no?
We did. Yeah.
Okay. Nice, man. It's interesting. I like how the fact that your initial thought was, what everybody goes through, right? Like an emotional, right? Like frustration, everything. But the thing is reacting to it would be the downfall, right? So if you're like, oh my God, I got to do something quicker or revert back and like, let's take her back in and forget the pay time off kind of thing, right? But it's good to just sit in it, which kind of leads to the post or to what has happened recently, right? With one of your practices, I guess the construction delays, financial planning and risk management, the hiring and retaining talent, and then the marketing too. How did that all come out to be?
The post I had talked about, he's talking about, I had made in a couple dental Facebook groups that I'm in. And I wanted to share this story, so that other dentists can realize like, hey, you're not the only one going through this crap. Like, it's hard to be a dentist. It's hard to be a dental practice owner. It's hard to do a dental startup. There's always just a ton of crap that you have to deal with, but it's so worth it. If you can just put your head down, keep your nose to the grindstone and just kind of power through, it can lead to some really great things. And so, our two newest startups, they were actually supposed to open in June or July of 2023. And they didn't open until basically February of 2024. So, I mean, we had 6 months plus of delays with the construction. The contractor is honestly, just like not a good person. He would lie through his teeth. He would, just whatever it was to kind of get us off his back. And he wasn't very upfront or transparent. He would tell me, oh yeah, we're a little bit behind. It's going to be another week. It's going to be another, 2 weeks, whatever it is. And so I had planned, I had everything in place. I had equipment ordered. I had custom cabinetry designed, sitting in a warehouse. I had all of our teams hired for these 2 new offices that are going in this one building. And he just kept pushing us back 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 week, 3 weeks, 1 month, whatever it was. So I had to try to deal with all of the vendors, people that are holding up. My cabinet guy was like ready to kill me because he had 13 custom cabinets sitting in his, 12 o'clock cabinets sitting in his warehouse. We lost almost half the team I had hired. So over half the team we had hired. Really, the people that stuck around were the doctors, office manager. But most of our team members that we initially hired, we had to replace because they couldn't wait through all these construction delays. So you guys know what a pain in the butt it is to hire, a team member. Imagine hiring, what do we hire, 12 team members and then having to replace most of them because of your contractor and his construction delays. So it was a nightmare. It's one of those situations where you feel like you're completely helpless because I did everything I could to try to light a fire under his ass and to keep things moving. But it just, nothing worked. Nothing got his attention. He just didn't care. And so, to Michael's point, guys, we can't control everything that happens. We can't control what happens to us, but we can control our response to it. And so as frustrated as I was, rather than sit there and throw myself a pity party and say, woe is me and whatever else, I said, okay, what good can I find out of this situation? And, I realized that as I'm preparing to open 2 more practices, I still didn't have all my ducks in a row at the first 2 practices. And so the time that I had expected to spend into getting these new practices off the ground, I said, you know what, until this contractor actually gets this project moving, I'm going to stop putting all this energy into this thing that I can't control. And I'm going to start putting that energy back into the thing I can control, which is my existing practices. And we really defined all of our systems, focused on our hygiene, productivity, focused on our leadership team, leaned into training and things like that. And because of that, we had our best stretch ever. I mean, those 2 practices, Q4 of last year, basically the time as I'm still dealing with these construction delays, they had their best quarter ever. I think it's because of the delays that had happened with the new offices. So again, even a terrible situation that is, very frustrating, there are good things that can come out of it. You just have to approach it in the right way.
Gotcha. Okay. And how did you maintain like the team morale or as much of it as you can and manage expectations with your staff during the extended construction delays?
I mean, with most of the team, I didn't. Like I said, they left. So, we had hired basically a whole new team as we got closer to the end of the construction delays. And fortunately, they stuck around until we actually got the offices open. But as far as the doctors go, man, I had found 2 amazing associate doctors and I did not want to lose them. You can replace any team member, including an associate doctor, but if you want to have multi-location offices and you want to not be at that office and have that office succeed, you need to have really great associate doctors in there. And so these 2 I had found, I knew they were going to be a great fit. I wanted to do everything I could to hold on to them. I had multiple phone calls with them trying to talk them through the situation. I basically created work for them to do at our existing practices, so at least they could pick up some hours there and things like that until the new practice opened. We also decided kind of as a bonus to kind of gift them some small equity in the new startups after they're there for a year. So that was kind of another kicker to stay around. Hey, I know this situation sucks. It sucks for me too. But I really believe if you can stick through it, you're going to do incredible things at this new office. And as a reward for helping me, build these new startups from the ground up and for sticking out these construction delays, when you hit your 1 year mark there, I'm going to gift you some small percentage of equity in the office. So kind of as like sweat equity or whatever you will say.
Do you normally do that with your associates or no?
So this is the first time we're doing it, and we're doing it because they're new startups that are associate driven. But my thought is moving forward, if we do any more startup type of practices, I'll probably make that same offer. It's tough to convince great associate docs to go in and build a startup office that's not theirs if they have nothing on the line versus just coming into an already existing office that has patients and has production for them to do and all that stuff. That's a little bit of a different sell. And that's what most doctors are looking for. So I think it kind of takes another level person to go into a startup and build it for you. And so that's why to me that made sense. And I was happy to do it for those guys.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Could I ask, if you want to give me the exact number, it would be perfect. But you can give me a range, like what percentage of equity are you giving them?
It's a smaller percentage. It's 5% equity. But again, it's sweat equity. So we're not asking for, any money for the equity that they're receiving.
Yeah. No, that's nice, man. That's nice. How'd you find them?
Word of mouth. So, on the implant side, I do have a partner. So I'm kind of by myself on the general side, but the implant offices, I've got a 50-50 partner. He's a periodontist. So he knew the one guy and had recommended him and kind of linked us up. And then the implant doctor actually linked me up with the other general doctor. So that's the nice thing is as you grow and as your reputation grows in an area, you start to network more, you meet more dentists and through connections, you can find great associates without having to go to Indeed and places like that.
Nice. Okay. And then real quick, is the contractor known? Like, is he pretty well known or no?
He's like a developer. So he does these bigger developments. I don't know how well known he is, but I do know that when I made that post on Facebook, a dentist that I used to work with at another practice texted me. He used to have his own practice. He did as a startup. And then as his kids got older, he actually sold it and just went back to work as an associate for less stress, less headaches. But he texted me to tell me that 20 years ago, when he opened his startup, he used that same contractor and it was a nightmare. And he actually had to get lawyers involved to work the situation out at the end. So apparently this guy's just been doing the same thing for at least the last 20 years. And that's the crazy part. Like, is he still doing it? Because if imagine as a dental office, if you just treated your patients terribly, it would never happen. We got Google reviews and things like that. Unfortunately, in some other lines like this with the contractors, there's not all these reviews for his company. I mean, people don't really leave reviews for contractors like they do for dental offices. So, when I got involved in this project, I had no idea the person that I was getting involved with. So that probably does go to show you guys, if you can vet your contractors and talk to other people that have worked with them, probably is a good thing to do. This was kind of a unique situation, though. It was a very good opportunity. And unfortunately, I didn't have a choice of contractors because it was his development. So if I wanted to get into this development, I had to use him. So that's why I didn't probably do the normal vetting that I would with different contractors to kind of figure out the project. But
gotcha. Okay. Did you want to mention who he is, or do you want just people to DM you whenever they?
No, I mean, I mentioned it on Facebook. I have no problem. I would love to save other dentists from having to deal with the same thing I did. So, I mean, if you're anywhere in the general Tampa, Florida area, his name's Kevin Howell. Don't use him for the construction of your office because you will regret it.
All right, man. And then any final words of advice or pieces of advice you want to give to our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, guys, I think the kind of whole theme today, and it's stuff that I've touched on before, but if you want to quickly grow your dental practice, especially if you're a startup, you have to go against the conventional wisdom. You have to take some risks. You have to have an abundance mindset. You can't be scared to spend money to make money. Scared money don't make money. I think that some famous poet or something said that once, but that's basically my advice, guys, is like, all of those experts out there telling you can't afford to hire a hygienist. Think about it the other way. You can't afford not to hire a hygienist when you first open your practice. You don't have the money in your budget to spend on marketing. You're not going to have a budget if you don't spend money on marketing because you're not going to have any patients coming in the door and you're not going to have any revenue. So, the more that you can get out of your comfort zone, the more you can go against that conventional wisdom, the faster you can grow. And that's how I was able to grow, from 0 to 4 practices in just over 3 years. And from, $0 in collections to at this point, we're targeting 10 million this year. But it wasn't without a lot of work, and it wasn't without a lot of risk, and it wasn't without an abundance mindset that we were able to do that.
Nice, man. I appreciate that. And if anyone has any further questions or concerns, Where can they reach out to you?
Yeah. So, if you haven't already, I do have a dental podcast. You can check it out. It's called Dental Unfiltered. It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that stuff. Every week we release an episode. I go into a lot of detail about our different systems and marketing and growth and just all kinds of stuff like that. If you want to reach out to me personally, you can. Best thing to do is shoot me an email. My email is docvallodds@gmail.com. DOC, my last name is Vallo, V as in Victor, ALLO, and then just DDS@gmail.com. Guys, I will answer you. I will tell you I actually own 5 businesses now and have a 18-month-old and do my dental podcast. So things do get a little bit tied up sometimes. Sometimes I need a friendly reminder, but I will get back to you, when I get a chance. I'm happy to help. I mean, guys, I really have this mentality that we can all be successful. I don't view other dentists as my competition. I view things like iPhones and vacations and cars as my competition because that's what patients are choosing to spend their money on, as opposed to their dental care. So if you have a startup, if you've got a young practice and you want some advice on something, feel free to reach out. But I would say before you reach out, at least check out my podcast, listen to what I have to say there, because the things you are asking me may already be answered in my podcast. So.
Nice. Awesome. So that's all going to be in the show notes below. And Andrew, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll hear from you soon, man.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.